If you're a parent who has a needy child, or if you're a new parent who does not want to ever have to deal with having a needy child, then this video is for you. My name is Daniel. My daughter said her first word at 6 weeks old, making her the youngest baby in the world to ever start talking. And her behavior is absolutely pristine. She is calm and happy and cooperative and independent. Her focus and energy is directed towards growth and development, towards opportunity. And none of this was by accident. So in this video, I'm going to show you my formula for driving independence and putting an end to neediness. And we're going to kick this off by just understanding where neediness comes from, the root cause of neediness. So every child will fall somewhere on this behavioral spectrum. They may fall on this side where it's total chaos, or this side where everything is absolutely amazing. Now, what dictates where their behavior lands is how well their needs are met. And every child has 4 core needs. You could think of these like developmental checkpoints. As their needs get met and as they stay met, your child will progress upwards along this hierarchy. And at the very top is where they are focused on growth and development. They're focused on opportunity to learn and develop. And this is where they become independent. If, however, their energy and focus gets trapped at any of these 2 levels down here, they will become needy. And so this is not what you want, because the consequences of this, the consequences of leaving these 2 levels unmet or even slightly met, is that your child is going to become clingy. They're going to need you to constantly validate the connection and prove to them that you love them. They're going to want you to hold them all the time. They're not going to want to walk by themselves when you go outside. They may want you to stroll them all the time. And they are going to constantly need your attention. They also may become overreactive, where they're constantly set off and triggered by every little thing. They could become disruptive and attention seeking to try to gain attention in any way that they could. And so these essentially will affect you, but they also have long-term consequences that parents don't often think about, because as parents, it's somehow become the norm that young children are needy, babies, toddlers, even children. But this is not normal. This is a signal that they have unmet needs. And the consequences of this long term are that your child will develop coping mechanisms. And what I mean by this is later in life, they will begin to form patterns and dynamics where they feel like they need to be a people pleaser in order to feel safe, in order to feel connected. They feel like they need to overperform. They need to impress people. They need to win the approval of other people. And they also could develop this toxic dynamic where they're constantly seeking drama and conflict with others, because that is how they get attention from others. And so anytime your child has an unmet need, they will develop coping mechanisms. Each one of these levels has sub-levels, and depending on which specific sub-level is unmet will dictate what the coping mechanism is. But in general, when your child is needy, when they are feeling needy and acting needy, they're developing one of these 3 coping mechanisms. Now, on the flip side, conversely, if you are properly meeting your child's needs, and this is exactly what I teach, how to properly meet your child's needs. This is the number 1 job of every parent. If you are properly meeting your child's needs, the benefits of this is that your child's personality will develop optimally. Your child will develop high openness. And you can think of openness as their risk tolerance, their ability to go and explore on their own, engage with the world, be curious about the world. They will develop high conscientiousness, which you can think of this as your willpower, but it's actually much more than that, because a lot of psychologists think or have thought for a long time that willpower is finite. But conscientiousness is also affected by your belief system, because you could have the capacity for exerting lots of willpower before it burns out. But if you have unmet needs that are obstructing your ability to apply that willpower, you're going to have low conscientiousness. So you will have a child with high conscientiousness if you get this right. You will also have a child who is high in extroversion. And also, psychologists think that this idea of extroversion and introversion are these fixed traits that you are either born with or not, but these are actually reflections of your self-esteem. So if you show your child that they are safe and valued, and that there is a strong connection between their caregiver and them, well, this sets the foundation for your child's self-esteem levels. And you're going to push your child to become higher in extroversion, which is beneficial because we are social animals. You want your child to feel like they can take social risks. You do not want them stuck in their own head, feeling self-conscious, overthinking and overanalyzing every social situation to the point where they are paralyzed. This is what self-esteem is. This is why self-esteem evolved, and I will make an entire video on self-esteem and extroversion. Now, you also want your child to have low neuroticism, although you can make arguments for slightly higher levels, especially in boys, and I'll make videos on that as well. You want them to have high self-worth, and you want them to have low agreeableness, which means they are putting their needs before the needs of others. They feel secure in voicing their opinions. They can be authentic to who they are, and they're not inhibited by feeling a background deficiency in the things that they need to feel safe and secure as humans. So when you get this right, you optimize their personality, but you also optimize the relationship that you have with them. They begin to trust you, they respect you, and therefore they will cooperate. They will feel and act and behave calm. They will be healthy. They will become independent. This will push their focus and energy. It will free up their focus and energy to be focused on opportunity. They will be self-directed, and they will take initiative in order to learn new things and explore the world. And so, how do you nurture your child's independence? How do you prevent your child from becoming needy? And if your child is already needy, what can you do to reverse it? So, in newborns, it's actually incredibly easy, because a newborn is essentially a blank slate when it comes to their belief systems. And so you've probably heard the saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And this is 100% true. And so in a newborn, it's very easy because you're not reversing anything. You're simply starting with a blank slate. And so there's this idea in business. It is speed to lead. And in parenting, it is speed to need. As soon as your newborn or your baby begins to cry or begins to signal that they need something from you, the faster you can address it, the more secure they will feel, the more connected they will feel. And therefore, you will be setting up their foundation for everything else in life and for all of their relationships in life and for the dynamics that will begin to form with you and them. And this will make them feel safe, and it will prevent them from becoming needy. Because if your child in their early years is constantly feeling secure and connected, they form the beliefs that the world is safe, that I am loved, and they will not constantly be stuck trying to validate that. On the other hand, you may have heard this method of putting children to sleep called the cry it out method. And this is one of the things that the mainstream parenting experts of today are beginning to get right, that the cry it out method is extremely harmful. And what it is when your child is crying and you're putting them to sleep, you essentially ignore them for longer and longer periods. So maybe one night you ignore them for an hour and then you go address it. The next, 30 minutes and then go address it. Then the next night it's an hour and then you go address it, and then an hour and a half. And you just create these longer and longer and longer periods where you're not responding to them to try to train them to self-soothe and calm themselves. And what you're doing is you're forcing them to develop coping mechanisms. And in doing that, you're going to trap their energy at these low levels. And this is going to drive up their neediness. This is going to hurt them, and it's also going to hurt you. One of the things that I like to preach when I coach parents is that this is an investment. When you get this right, and the more often you get this right, for every minute that you put into it, let's say, you're going to get an hour back. Rather than having to constantly put out fires, you're able to prevent all of the chaos. And so by putting a little bit of time and energy into getting this right, you're preventing having to deal with all this chaos and constantly have a child who is needing stuff from you. You could think of a sort of minimal input to maximize the effectiveness of your parenting, and this is how you do it. So the second thing that influences a newborn's neediness, or will influence their neediness, is the quality of nutrition, which is entirely dependent on the mother's diet. So the quality of their nutrition is going to influence, number one, how secure they feel, both psychologically and physiologically. And it's also going to influence how connected they feel. Because if a child is nutrient deficient, they're not going to be feeling good. And no matter how much love you try to show to them, they're not going to feel or be able to feel as connected to you because this lower level is unmet. And that is how this works. The lower the level, the more influence it has. And the lowest unmet need is where all of your child's focus and energy is going to land. So speed to need and quality nutrition is essential with newborns, and it's very easy to get that right. In children, in order to prevent the coping mechanisms and in order to drive independence, you need to meet their needs preemptively. And it's very easy to do this when you understand what their needs are and when you understand signaling theory. I don't want to get too bogged into this, but essentially, there are different actions you can take in order to meet your child's needs. And there's this idea in behavioral ecology of honest signals. These are the signals that are most influential in communication. And so when it comes to meeting your child's needs, you want to focus on the highest leverage actions that will effectively meet your child's needs so that you can, again, put the least amount in and get the most amount out. And when you're meeting your child's needs preemptively, I have identified 8 big actions that will essentially fill up these tanks. You could think of each level as a tank. It will fill up these tanks and keep them full the longest. So you need to meet your child's needs preemptively. This will drive all of their focus and energy towards opportunity, growth, and development. You also need to make sure that you never destroy the connection. A lot of parents think that you have to constantly prove your love to your child, but this isn't exactly the case, because when you understand signaling, it is far better not to destroy the connection than it is to try to build up the connection. And it is also far more costly if you destroy the connection than if you just simply do not build it. So long as you are not destroying it, the impact will not be as great. And then you also do not want to use discipline. There is, in my philosophy, only one time and place for discipline, and that is if your child's physical safety is at risk. And then you also want to undo all of the damage that you may have caused if you simply didn't understand this stuff when you first became a parent. And if that is the case, it's not your fault. Nobody is currently teaching any of this. And so you have probably made mistakes. You have probably caused some degree of damage. There are probably coping mechanisms that have formed. But fortunately, as humans, we have an extremely high degree of neuroplasticity, and you can reconfigure the beliefs that form, especially earlier on in childhood. Obviously, the younger your child is, the easier it is to reverse damage, the less energy it will cost to undo, but it is possible all the way up until adulthood. And so, as an adult, if you want to reverse the neediness and the coping mechanisms that evolve and emerge when you have unmet needs at these levels, which it's very likely that we all had unmet needs at these levels in some shape or form. Well, if you want to undo the people pleasing and the overperforming and the drama seeking so that you can show up as the best parent, because if you are dealing with, and if you are influenced by these coping mechanisms, you are not going to be able to show up as effective as possible for your child. So in my program, this is also something that I help parents with. I help them overwrite their trauma. I help them completely get rid of the coping mechanisms, and I help them learn how to properly meet their needs so that they can show up effectively for their children. And when you get this right, like I said, not only does parenting become far easier and require far less energy, but this all feeds into one another. When you understand how to effectively meet your child's needs, well, now you have a lot less to deal with. And when you are overwriting your trauma and properly meeting your needs, you now have the capacity to deal with more chaos, even though you're going to have less chaos because you're going to get everything, you're going to be better at meeting your child's needs. And so the final thing I want to touch on is temperament. Now, a lot of parenting experts, and in fact, I have not seen a single parenting expert get this right. They think that temperament is a fixed trait, that your child's temperament is just something that they are born with. And this is not true. Temperament is an emergent pattern. It is not a fixed trait. And it is essentially the sum total of your child's genetics, the expression of those genes, because there is something called epigenetics, and your child's gene expression is influenced by the environment, by their early experiences, by the emotional environment that they are in, by their nutrition, and also by their physiological states. And then these things also feed into your child's neurological configurations. which then will feed back on the gene expression. So temperament is not a fixed trait. The inputs are highly influential. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because if you have a child who is needy, or if you have a child who is difficult in any way, shape, or form, you have all of these parenting experts who are telling you that you have a strong-willed child, or maybe you have a deeply feeling kid, or maybe you have some child who has some kind of an issue. And this is perhaps the most harmful thing you could ever do as a parent, both to your child, but also to yourself. And so I want you guys to understand that you should never label your child, and that all of those labels are in fact not even accurate. But when you do label a child, even in your own mind, even if you just think that you have a deeply feeling kid, well, those beliefs are going to influence your child's behavior, because there's something called confirmation bias. And this is something that scientists have to be aggressive in looking out for when they carry out experiments. Double-blind studies exist because you don't want to corrupt the data with your own beliefs. And it works the same way for relationships. If you hold the belief that you have this problem child, a deeply feeling kid, a strong-willed kid, a kid who is problematic, well, you're going to seek out experiences to confirm that belief, and you're going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy where you just continue to drive that behavior rather than simply understand where it is actually coming from and properly address it. And so if you also label your child as problematic, or you treat them as problematic in some way, it's also going to drive their own beliefs about themselves. And not only will they develop coping mechanisms around it, but it's not going to put an end to it. And so the only way that you can address behavior is by addressing the root cause of it. Anytime your child has any kind of bad behavior, you never want to address the behavior itself. You never want to address the emotions behind the behavior. You want to address the unmet needs behind the behavior. And this is why I say that discipline does not have a place in parenting unless your child's physical safety is at risk. And so if you want help learning how to undo the damage that you may have created already, or if you have a newborn and you want to learn all of the strategies to prevent them from developing coping mechanisms, and you want to learn how to properly and preemptively meet your child's needs in the most effective way possible, leveraging some of the most elaborate theories in communication, in biology and behavioral ecology, if you're an adult and you want to overcome your own trauma so that you can overcome your coping mechanisms and behave authentically and feel calm and not feel like you're constantly overreacting or having to perform, or perhaps creating drama in your own family so that you can feel valuable. If you want me to show you how to engineer the perfect personality in your child, and when I say perfect, I don't mean perfect in some kind of a unhealthy sort of pathological way. I mean perfect in a fundamental way. Perfect in the sense that you're not having to obsess over getting everything right and being so on point to the point where you become just completely overwhelmed. But perfect in the sense that you focus on a few fundamentals. You get this stuff right, and then everything becomes easy. Your child's personality develops around optimal personality characteristics. You have a great relationship with your child. You unlock your child's full potential, and you allow them to focus their energy on growth and development. Perfect in the sense that you get the fundamentals right, which is very, very easy when you understand them. And then everything else just takes care of itself. You could just sit back and relax because you know that you're getting the fundamentals right. If you guys want my help with this, if you want me to coach you on this, I'm going to drop a link below this video where you can schedule a call with my team. We'll kind of walk you through what the program looks like. And if you have any questions, you can ask whatever it is that you're dealing with or whatever it is that you have questions about on that call. Now, that is it. This is how neediness works in a nutshell. And if you guys have other topics that you would like me to cover, like I mentioned, I will cover self-esteem. In fact, I might cover all of these because they're all equally important to understand as a parent. If you guys have anything that you'd like me to cover, feel free to drop it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.